So dear chess friends, black just played bishop h6 here, and we are searching for a good move for white. How would you play this position with white pieces? Today we are discussing the opponent's last move and the questions we should ask ourselves to find the best moves in those moments. I've seen as a coach many times that people get scared by the opponent's last move. We should always look at the threats we are facing. That's always the number one question. Whenever your opponent makes a move, you must ask yourself, what would they do if you don't make a move right now? That's the most important information you must extract from the opponent's move. But equally importantly, you must ask yourself, what are the possible drawbacks of the opponent's last move? This way, you have a higher chance in spotting the mistakes and punishing those moves, folks. So today in this episode, I will show you instructive positions where I will exploit the opponent's mistakes, and we will go through some of the key questions that can signal us, that can make it easier for us to spot those blunders. Okay, so let's look at this position first. Bishop h6. It looks like they are putting some pressure on the knight on f4, right? The bishop is pinning your knight. They are putting some pressure on that piece. And if you only focus on the threats you're facing, maybe you get scared. Let's say maybe, oh, queen e5 is coming and they will put pressure on my knight. You feel uncomfortable perhaps. But if I, for example, ask you specifically, what could be the potential drawback of this move bishop h6? What would you say? Yes, the first observation, the bishop becomes a loose piece, right? Nobody is guarding this bishop on h6. So that's always a great question. Question is, did a piece become unprotected as a result of the opponent's last move? And yes, indeed, now the bishop is hanging on h6. That's a loose piece. That's a loose piece. And loose pieces drop off in chess. And how do we exploit this? Please stop the video and find a good move for white, folks. You're a great player if you came up with the move knight g6, discovering an attack on the bishop on h6 while also hitting the queen on e7. That's how you punished the opponent's last move, because now if they recapture your knight, that's easy. We're gonna just win the bishop. Extra pawn for white, terrible king on g8. White is completely winning this position. And after knight takes g6, if they take our queen, obviously we take the queen with check, followed by knight takes c8. And white is completely winning in this line. So if you go back, both lines are very short, but you must ask yourself a very simple question of, can I exploit that? Is there a loose piece? Can I exploit that loose bishop on h6? Right? You try to actively search for potential defects behind the opponent's last move. That's how we spot such blunders in chess. And in this case, this is a discover attack. That's a very forcing move that hits the bishop, hits the queen. That must be investigated, right? But you should smell something. If you never smell that the bishop was a loose piece, you will never look at moves like this, right? That's completely out of your radar, basically. So in order to have such moves as a potential candidate moves for us, we must also, right, try to automatize this process of always be vigilant of the loose pieces on the chessboard, because tactics, right, usually stem from some problems in the opponent's camp. And that bishop, you might say, is a tactical weakness, right? Talking about weaknesses, that's a tactical liability for black. Because of their last move, the bishop became loose, and that's the way to punish it. Another position, folks, white goes bishop d3. And here I want you to find a good move for black. A very similar theme to the first puzzle. I want you to drill the same thought process in a different setting. It's black to play. Please stop the video and identify the potential drawback of the move bishop d3. How do you exploit this mistake? You're a great player, folks. First, if you identify the bishop on d3 as a loose piece, white just plays the bishop on a loose point, and loose pieces drop off in chess. And please tell me the tactic that works for black here. You're a great player if you came up with the move knight takes g3 here, folks. Knight takes g3 uncovers an attack on the loose bishop on d3, and if the bishop takes your bishop, the knight finds a lifeline. black won a pawn for nothing, plus black opened that diagonal. Black is having a completely crashing advantage in this position. Going back, what are the signals for us to find such tactical shots? Well, loose piece principle, drawback principle. This is a tactical weakness for white, the loose bishop on d3, and then you start searching for potential forcing solutions. And that's a very forcing move that discovers an attack on the loose piece. And if you go one move deeper, one ply deeper, right, you understand if they take the knight, then this loose bishop is dropping off. That also is a great news for black, of course. And if they want to save their bishop, they have to let our knight to save itself by recapturing on f5. Another position, folks. This time, white just went bishop f1. At first sight, it looks like they are hitting the pawn on h3. But a strong player not only looks at the threat they are facing, they also actively search for the potential drawback of this move. The bishop was on e2, now the bishop is on f1. What has changed? Which piece has become unprotected right now? And that's the key question we are drilling in today's episode, folks. Which piece became loose as a result of bishop f1? Yes, you're right. The knight on f3 became a loose piece as a result of the white's last move. Is there a way for black to exploit the loose knight on f3? Tactics flow from such potential problems in the position. That knight is the first problem for white. And if you have a good board vision, you also notice that these two rooks can be potentially forked by the knight on b3, correct? So how can black combine these two ideas? You're a great player, folks, if you came up with the move bishop d5, and this creates a double attack on the knight on f3 and also the knight b3 fork, right? You see it. You see it, guys. It's a beautiful move for black that exploits the opponent's last move, and there is no way for white to both save the knight but also stop this fork on b3. Black wins material. I love this example because of its combined, right? Seeing the threat, but also you must look at the potential drawback of the opponent's last move. If you purely focus on this pawn on h3, then you can lose. You can actually miss this resource, right? You can just play passively, and now white has one full tempo to defend against your idea, knight b3. This move creates only single threat, and white will find a way to solve their problem. But if you instead have a good tactical antenna, if you're aware of the loose pieces in any position, then you have a much higher chance in spotting such tactical ideas. Let's talk about another similar concept. Pawn moves, folks. Pawn moves are very committal. Imagine that the opponent just played g5. Pawns cannot go backwards in chess, so obviously in those moments you should be very, very careful in identifying the potential defects of that pawn move, because every pawn move creates a weakness in chess. As a result of g5, if I ask you, what has become weak in the black camp, right? So that's the first question. What has become unprotected as a result of the move g5? You're a great player if you noticed this f6 square, correct? Now this square has become an outpost. There is no way for black to cover that square with their pawns anymore, right? Again, going back, the drawback principle. The pawn was covering f6, no more after g5. Is there a way for white to exploit this problem, this weakness in the black camp? Please stop the video, folks, and find a good move for white. You're a great player if you looked at the knight on d5, which is the only protector against the beautiful knight fork on f6. Thus, you remove the defender with the move c4, and once the knight moves, your knight is landing f6, delivering this amazingly beautiful fork on f6. It's as simple as that, folks. White plays c4 and white wins material. The way, the mechanism, the algorithm to find this resource is you actively search for the drawback of behind the opponent's last move, and you don't only focus on the threats you're facing with moves like, for example, g4. If you're only a passive player, you might say, oh, black is attacking me on the king side, pawn storm is raging, my king is so weak, I must do something, right? That's a purely passive mindset. If you're only focusing on the opponent's threats and never ask yourself what has become weak as a result of the opponent's last move. I mean, drawback principle also applies to the opening in chess. For example, in this position, theoretical move is bishop d7. That comes from Caro-Kann, advanced Caro-Kann. But imagine that the black player goes bishop h7 here, folks. If you know, for example, that bishop d7 is a theoretical move, and if your opponent plays bishop h7, you should be very, very curious, and you should actively ask yourself, what could be the potential drawback of the move bishop h7 so that this is not visible in practical games, in master games, for example, right? That's how you exploit the drawback behind the opponent's last move. And yes, the drawback is this. Now black bishop doesn't cover the e6 square, and white should push e6 and engage in this beautiful positional pawn sacrifice e6, folks. That's a very typical theme in the Caro-Kann, and as a result of this pawn sacrifice, white first of all buries the bishop on f8. From now on, the bishop's development will be hindered. Black also has some issues around the king. Black has a weak pawn on e6. Black also has a weak square on e5. White will later exploit this e5 square. The black king got a little bit weaker, and well, the game basically goes like this, right? Bishop d3, you can take twice, and now the queen eyes this g6 square. That's a beautiful positional pawn sacrifice. White is stopping e5 and developing their army like this. I will briefly show you a couple of moves. Knight e5 is a very nice move. You basically force this trade, otherwise this is coming after takes. Please look at those two pieces. They are completely shut down from the game, and that was white's game plan with the positional pawn sacrifice e6 in this position. I won't delve so much into detail about that position, but I'm just going to tell you that this principle applies to the opening positions, right? You should always have a keen eye. When the opponent makes a strange move that you haven't seen before, you see a surprise. Instead of having a fear mindset, you should ask yourself, what is the potential defect of this move, right? That's how you spot blunders. That was also Mark Dvoretsky's advice. He said, if your opponent makes a strange looking move, ask yourself, what could be the potential problems behind such moves? Then it's much easier for you to have this eye, antenna, to find the potential mistakes. Now I'll show you a more advanced version of the same idea that also applies to positional themes. In this position, imagine black plays bishop b7 and they start putting pressure on the pawn on c3. That pawn is a backward pawn, potential weakness for white, and the opponent's last move was bishop b7. Now I want you to not only focus on the problem on c3 and make a passive move like this, that will be too passive, that happened in the actual game, but I want you to actively engage in finding the potential defect of the move bishop b7. That's an advanced puzzle, folks. Please take your time. Please stop the video. Go deeper. The first prompt is this, the Shankland Rule. Do you recall? I made several videos about this concept. If a positionally desirable move looks unplayable at first sight, you should be stubborn and try to use tactics to make that move work anyways. Now you can stop the video and find a great positional move for white that also exploits the bishop b7 move. You're a great player, folks, if you came up with the move c4. White simply get rid of the backward pawn on c3, right? This pawn was a backward pawn on c3. After c4, white says no longer. But black says, you know what? What if I take twice, right? It looks like black was putting pressure on the pawn on c4, and now you show them the drawback of their last move, right? The rook is now eyeing the potential loose bishop on b7, and black has no time to capture on c4 because of this. Isn't it beautiful, folks? Isn't it beautiful? Going back, bishop b7 looks like a very active move. Black puts pressure, but white, instead of reacting passively, exploits the drawback of the bishop b7 move. That's why chess is a beautifully complex and deep game, folks, right? It's always good to have a keen eye on the opponent's last move and not only passively react, but also actively engage in finding those mistakes. In this particular position, knight e5 is a very nice move, guarding c4, and if the knights are traded off, right, white will have a beautiful game in the end. I'm going to defend my pawn anyways, and I basically open up lines for my rooks on the b file, and white is just having a beautiful game. If you go back to this initial position, if you only defend passively, then that's exactly what gives, yeah, black enough chances to fight in this position. And let's finish with the homework position, folks. Black just play queen c7 here. I want you to ask yourself the same question. What can be the potential defect of the opponent's last move? And how can I exploit that? I want you to actively ask yourself, what are the potential problems behind queen c7? And is there a way for white to exploit it using some tactics? I hope you liked this video. I did it to help you with your thought process in chess. But obviously, watching this video itself won't be enough for you to fix it. You need to drill those examples. And Chessable is a great platform for you to drill that, because I have a course about this that I published last December. It's called My Opponent's Last Move: Identifying Threats, Mistakes, and Misconceptions. And today we focus on mistakes and misconceptions. How do we exploit that, right? Those questions will be your guidances. What has become unprotected as a result of the opponent's last move? And if they make a pawn move, what are the potential weaknesses they have created, right? We can come up with so many other rules of thumbs, but these two questions are one of the most important when you are identifying potential problems behind your opponent's last move. This way, you will raise your floor, you will frustrate your opponents, you will exploit and find their mistakes, because they will keep making mistakes against you. So this way, you will exploit their mistakes in a much more efficient way. Those examples on Chessable are great because they're different levels. You will train on the level that suits you personally as a player. And after training, repetitive training with good questions, good explanations, you will see that your thought process will change, and those processes will be much more automatized in your brain. And that's how you become a stronger player, okay? Please give me a like and subscribe if you like this video, folks. Please give me feedback. How did you find this video? Did they speak to you? Did you, for example, find the right answers relatively quickly? And I'm here to help support you in your chess journey. Never hesitate asking any questions along the way, and I will catch you on the next episode with similar themes. Bye-bye.